Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another podcast stream or whatever we call this. Youthman is not here. It's just Jonathan and I. So if you want to leave, now is probably the time. Because it's not gonna get better. But just saying hey to people in the chat. JD the expert, Joe Lennox, Chris is here, JDE, Zarabox, Harobox. I can never tell when people start and end their names with X. Do I pronounce those or they? It just confuses me.
Yeah, I don't know how to say that either.
Jason Marin. That's it. So exciting. Like I said, Youthman is not coming. He's got a couple of guests. I think Jeff from JTR is coming out to his house, and Tony is at his house.
Yeah, SOWK off the forums.
SRW 1000, Howard Wang, Bruce Barnes. Hello. Only you two? Unfortunately. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If you wanted to see somebody actually attractive, today is not your day.
Yeah, bad day.
But Jonathan, our topic today is recent most impactful immersive movies and music. Now, I put that up there, and then you and I were kind of talking about what we'd seen, and I realized that I'd only seen one movie recently. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how long this topic's going to be, but I think you've seen more than me. So why don't we start with you? What have you seen?
Well, so I haven't watched anything that's like notable except for this documentary that's just phenomenal. It's called The Alpineist, and it's on Netflix. And, you know, we were clowning on John Wick 4 last podcast. There was kind of an element of not really being vulnerable. Like, he's invulnerable. He just can dodge all the shots and never get hit. And so there's not a whole lot of suspense when that kind of situation happens. This documentary about the Alpinist is kind of the opposite. It's like a real life situation, a climber who climbs these impossible cliffs that other professional climbers don't think is even like feasible. And there's all kinds of suspense because those guys can and do die in those ventures.
Well, everybody dies at some point in their life, much like how my screen freezes at some point during every stream.
Any rate, this guy's climbing in ice and snow and water. Mountains that are like 3 times the size of El Capitan, for instance. If you've watched Free Solo, it's along those lines, which was another fascinating documentary about Alex
Free Solo is more exciting and not surrounded by people dying.
This guy climbs probably more risky than Alex Honnold does. His name was Marc-Andre Leclerc, and he's moved on now. He's not in this realm anymore. He died doing one of his climbs. But at any rate, I don't even understand how it's humanly possible, and it's incredibly intense and amazing to watch this guy climb, because he's climbing these rock faces that are basically alternating between ice picks and like rock shoes and then ice shoes. Like it's a mixed climb, and he's of this nature who doesn't go out and plot his path in advance. So, you know, like Alex Honnold in his documentaries, he'll climb things with ropes and try to get the hang of it and feel very confident on his work. So
he's a cheater.
No, he's trying to do it smart. Like, he takes a lot of risks, but they're calculated risks.
Sounds like
this Marc-Andre, he kind of just walks up to the cliff and like eyeballs it and says he hasn't ever climbed it before. I'm just going to go for it. So he climbs these, like one of the things he was climbing was an 8,000-foot cliff with ice and snow and sheer vertical faces, no ropes, no secondary person. And I don't even understand how it's humanly possible, but he's climbing these cliffs with bare fingers, right? Because these are the kind of cliffs that there's not even any purchases. Like, it's like Spider-Man stuff, you know, like you don't even understand how a mortal human can climb those things. Not only that, but it's in snow and ice and freezing wind and blizzard conditions and stuff.
So does he get to stop at some point?
Yeah. I mean, he'll climb with a bag and he'll camp out on the way up sometimes.
Okay. I was like, man, 8,000 feet of ascent. That's over a mile.
So he did.
That's a long way.
He did nearly do it in one day without bags as one of the challenges he wanted for himself. So no tent. He almost did it, but a blizzard came when he was like 4 pieces off the top and he couldn't continue. He had to go back down. But I don't even understand how your fingers work. I mean, I guess you can get acclimated to that kind of thing.
They work by, you know, kind of.
But how do they not like freeze out? You know what I mean?
I don't know.
I mean, maybe you kind of like an Eskimo. Maybe you get used to the cold and you can
probably.
Get used to it. But my goodness, it's phenomenal to watch. So taking immersion to the next level. Your heart's racing. It's tense. It's really cool. It's called The Alpineist on Netflix, and it's not necessarily for sound. Visual is fantastic.
That'd be an interesting one to watch with D-Box. Like it was going to throw you out of your chair every once in a while.
Yeah.
Just randomly just kind of kicks you up and makes you feel like you're falling. Yeah. Talk about immersion.
Oh boy.
So anything else that you've seen?
No, we can talk about the audio stuff next, but what movies have you seen lately that you...
The only thing that I've seen was I watched Avatar: The Way of Water for the first time last night. And it's a visual spectacle. I mean, you haven't seen it, so we won't go too much into it, but I really enjoyed it. Now, I was doing some testing with it, so Mad VR is getting ready to release at some point in the next month or two our motion AI, which is motion interpolation. So I was doing some testing with it, and there were some things that I could see that maybe I have to go back and rewatch these parts, because with any full-fledged animation, motion AI allowed me to see some things where maybe at 24p you wouldn't see. Like something would happen and you just see like the animation, it would stop going from ragdoll to just this. But I was able to see that. But your brain forgets about that. It didn't take me out of the movie at all, but it was just interesting because you can see kind of the shortcuts that animators have to take so that they're not spending 9 years on things that people won't necessarily see. But it was a great movie. My 4-year-old, it was so good that my 4-year-old actually stayed engaged for 3 hours, which is saying something.
Sure.
She watched the entire thing in one sitting and then asked to watch it again today. So I really liked it. I enjoyed it. Is it like a movie that's rewriting cinema or changing how things are done? I guess to some extent because of the animation, but story-wise, it was decent. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was a good film. I enjoyed it.
So did you happen to see that one in the theater when it was first released?
That was the first time I'd seen it.
That was one I saw in the theater, the original one, when it was first released, and in 3D, and that was breathtaking. And it's
supposed to be breathtaking in 3D. The only thing I didn't like about this one is it seemed a little soft, like visually. But that's probably to cover up some of the things with animation, because virtually the entire film's animated. So they were probably just trying to cover some things so it didn't look super out of place. But if I compared it to something like, my daughter likes to watch Godzilla all the time, so I have Godzilla versus Kong all the time on. And Godzilla and Kong in those movies are super sharp, super detailed. And I thought at first when I was watching Avatar, I was like, is this out of focus? Am I losing my eyesight? What is happening? It's kind of one of those things like, crap, am I really getting that old? But it was just super, super soft. Nothing wrong with that. It was just how they did it. I'm assuming to cover up some of the stuff with animation. But that's all I've seen. I have a 4-year-old, so I have a tendency to get to watch the same things over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
So that's all I've been able to watch. But let's talk about music, because music's been a big one with what got released last week.
Pink Floyd.
Yes.
The 50th anniversary collection.
I haven't been able to listen to it, but Chris in chat, Ian and Ivan have been listening to it, and it's supposed to be awesome.
It's on Apple Music HD. So if you've got that
subscription,
which I know you do, you can check it out.
I'll have to do that.
Yeah, it's really good.
I'll have to do that. Have you listened to it already?
I've listened to probably 2/3 of it. I haven't made it all the way through yet. But yeah, it's really, really
you enjoyed
good.
it?
I did. Excellent.
So
in fact, that's how I've been spending my time in my theater mostly lately, is just listening to spatial audio on
He's come to the dark side of using his theater more for music than for movies. It's happened. We've converted another one, ladies and gentlemen. It's happening.
Yeah. Dolby Atmos music is really something special, and it seems like it's getting increasingly better with time. So
but it's got to be done right.
Yeah, but I think well, that's what I'm saying. I think it's increasingly becoming better. Like the breadth of it is better as you listen to new tracks that are coming out. So I started listening to the Dolby Atmos music about a year ago with Apple Music HD, and it's come a long way from then. Because then I mean, even in the Youth Band demo back in last July timeframe, I was introduced and I was kind of like, maybe a third of the music's good. Now I'm going to say it's more like 80% is good. So like of the new tracks that are coming out, they have a lot of new tracks that come out like every week, you know, like the charts get updated. There's a lot of new stuff that's coming out. They're remixing old music, all kinds of things. I'd say the majority of it is good now, and better than Upmixer, not just like oh, it's kind of similar to Upmixer, it's just different flavor. No, it's better than Upmixer in many cases.
Now,
And
what do you
Upmixer's
have
pretty
to
good.
classify for something to be good? Like, what do they have to do in the mix in order for you to be like, all right, this is worthwhile over something that's just kind of
So I would just say that it's if it's better than stereo, you know, like in the early days, like a year ago or so, sometimes I'd switch back to stereo or Dolby Surround, and I'd like that better, like the Dolby
Yeah.
Upmixer better than Dolby Atmos. And I don't think that's the case anymore. Most of the stuff is really, they're not doing as many crazy things with like weird stuff coming out of one channel or cycling stuff around that doesn't really make sense. It's more like kind of an environment or just a surround presence sometimes that really adds to the whole effect.
Now, what takes it to this is one of my all-time favorite tracks for you? Like, what sends it over the top instead of being like, yeah, this is better, but what defines something as being one of your favorites? Like, what does a track have to do in order to get there? 'Cause
That's a
I
great
think there is
question.
some characteristics and criteria that have to be met, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it can be done multiple ways. There's some tracks that do a really good use of like mixing the channels, and you do have like kind of a swirling effect, like with some sort of techno music or something that's pretty interesting. But a lot of the stuff that's in my playlist actually ends up just being like remixed really well. Like if you ever remember like an old 1970s track and a tape or something, it didn't sound very good, right? Well, they've remixed some of that stuff. I'm not sure how they're cleaning it up so well, but I've got some 1970s, 1980s music that's like, wow. I mean, it sounds like it's re-recorded. It's done so well. And then they've added more environment to it. It's just so much better than it's like what Dolby Pro Logic was before Dolby Digital. You know, like it's so much cleaner. It's kind of one of those things where sometimes you think like, how could it get any cleaner? You know, and we've been there before. I remember thinking that on many different levels of technology. How can it get any better? Well, it got better again, and a lot of that old stuff's really fun to listen to. CDs that I've had for 20 years, they sound way better in Dolby Atmos.
Yeah, for me, for something to get pushed over the top, it has to be past just kind of an enveloping sound where it's bordering on the line of all channel stereo at different levels. With maybe they have some of the ambient tracks or background tracks playing through some of the back stuff. That doesn't necessarily do it for me. Yeah, it's cool, and I think it sounds better than the original 2-channel mixes, but I think for something to send it over the top, they have to do things with the objects. They have to position things that are, I think, relevant to that particular track and make it more of an immersive experience than just spreading things out, if you will. I think that's the important thing or criteria that pushes things over the limit. Like, what's that? I can never remember the track, the German track that we listen to all the time during demos.
Yeah, I can't Kraftwerk. I can't think of the name of the album.
Kraftwerk's, but I don't remember the name of the album or the song. But they do a phenomenal job with object placement. You can hear things moving, but it's relevant. It's not like they're just doing it randomly. It's cool how they're doing it, and it adds to the experience. Because I think if you do it and it doesn't make sense, it can be a detractor. But if you do it right and it adds or multiplies the experience and brings you in, I think it's really, really important. Another one that I saw recently or listened to recently was Michael Jackson's Thriller was, I think, done really, really well. Like you were over last week, I think it was last weekend, and we went through a bunch of different stuff.
Sure.
To me, a lot of them just were kind of meh. And then there were some that were really, really cool. Even songs that I didn't really like that were just really, really well done that pulled me in. And I was just really enthralled with how they did it. Not necessarily how the music was, but how they did it. Like Wubba Wubba or whatever that one is.
I was trying to remember the name of the Imagine Dragons track. There's still some bad stuff.
Yeah.
I had one last night.
Nothing against the Imagine Dragons, but there's just some.
I like them.
Bad
mixes. There was a track. I sit here over at my computer desk, and it's by my left surround speaker. And a lot of times I'm listening to music down here if I'm on my PC. And so I'm listening to Dolby Atmos a lot of time or Dolby Surround. That speaker that's placed right here, if it's doing weird things, I know it, right? Because I'm sitting 2 feet away from it. And most of the time it's not. Most of the time it sounds great sitting here. Like it still mixes with the rest of the room. But there was an Imagine Dragons track that came on. And all of a sudden, like every once in a while, there was a vocal that would come through, like clipped, like halfway through a phrase or something. It would come through, and it was like, that's an example of bad mixing that you do run into sometimes. And I I almost think a human couldn't have done that. Like, it's got to be some sort of algorithm that upmixed it or something.
You were
Because
talking about that on Discord.
yeah, how would a human mixer do such a poor job? Because you're sitting here and there's like maybe a little cymbal or something that's kind of slight, and then all of a sudden a voice comes in like halfway through a phrase, and it's super loud and obnoxious. Now I went back to the main listening position to see like how bad it was there. There it wasn't bad, right? Because you're in the middle of all the speakers and they're doing normal things.
Do you think it was because of movement? Like maybe that object was moving?
I don't know. I didn't spend enough time with it really to try to evaluate to that level. It wasn't one of my favorites when I was in the main listening position either. Like, I would qualify that as just kind of an indifferent track when I was in the MLP. But when I was here, it was atypically obnoxious. Like, it was way worse than most as far as being off center and right next to a speaker.
It'd be interesting to turn off your fronts and listen to what the track was doing with just the surrounds and see if you could pick up what it was doing.
Yeah.
That'd be an interesting test. We should do that.
Yeah.
Because that's always eye-opening. People don't realize how little things a lot of their channels are doing, or what weird things a lot of their channels are doing in some of these poor mixes. So I think that'd be pretty interesting, as an enlightening experience, I guess.
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite tracks on Atmos? And if you don't have the list off the top of your head, I'll just pull up my playlist and I can tell you some of mine.
Let me pull up the playlist, or what I've been listening to. I don't even know how to say it. Geigerzoller.
Oh, I don't think I've heard that one.
No, it's the one that we really like. From Kraftwerks.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I've never heard that one. It's the one we listen to all the time.
The language I
can't Good Lord.
What's the name of it?
Geigerzoller or something.
Okay.
I'm probably mispronouncing
That's
it.
That's not in my favorites list, but I do like those couple Kraftwerk ones. If that's
one of my favorite artists that I've come to realize from Atmos or immersive audio for music is The Weeknd.
Yes, that's
he
really
does good phenomenal stuff.
Album with that.
He does phenomenal stuff with all of that. Geigerzoller, I think, is my favorite from Kraftwerks. The Weeknd. What else I got? Thriller was fantastic. And then another one of my favorite artists is Billie Eilish, or however you say that. She does her mixer, however they're doing it, is doing, and they do awesome mixes with a lot of their stuff anyway, but they've seemed to have fully embraced the immersive audio, and they're doing great stuff. When the Party's Over was a phenomenal mix. So I really enjoyed that. What about you? Give me a couple.
Yeah, so here's an example of an old one that came across real good to me. It's Tom Petty, and that album that I had on CD years ago. You Don't Know How It Feels is one that comes to mind. I really like the way they did that. There's some static instruments in different channels. Like up at the top left is a kind of a static instrument, but it's not overdone. Like, it's not like, wait, why is that there? That doesn't sound right. It sounds good. And it keeps in there the whole time. So it's not like bouncing around speakers, which is okay, but it sounds kind of goofy if you're listening to like rock or, something that's more traditional. Celestial by Ed Sheeran, Sharks by Imagine Dragons, Boom by Tiesto, and I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but that's a fun
interesting
one.
That some of the Imagine Dragon ones aren't good, but one of them is your favorite.
In my top 10 list, yeah.
Really interesting.
And then it's on a different album, I think.
Oh, that could be why.
Location by Khalid's really neat. Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. That's an old song that they just did an awesome job on remixing. Where Are You Now by Lost Frequencies and Callum Scott. Blurred Lines by Robin Thicke. Those are some of the best Atmos content that I've run into that I enjoy so far.
One that we listened to while you were over was, you were talking about old tracks, was Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond.
Yes, that's an excellent one.
Yeah, that was one that I don't care about Neil Diamond. I mean, he makes great music. People love him, but that track, for whatever reason, how it was mixed was just really, really cool. And it was over the top, and it really pulled me in. And I know when a track is really good, because I'll listen to the whole thing instead of skipping it halfway through, or I'll be like, oh, this is good, and then I'll move on to something else. But if I listen to it all the way through, it's got something. Zombie Russ asks, where do you get Atmos music? One of the best places is Apple Music. They have a huge library of an ever-growing of spatial audio, and they actually have Apple Music Studios that do a lot of this stuff with immersive processors and things like that. So Tidal, I think, has a bunch, but Jonathan and I do a lot with Apple Music.
Yeah, you know, the cheapest way to get into it is probably a Fire Stick with Amazon Music HD, but their selection is not quite
Not
as
as
good
good.
right now for spatial audio. I'm sure they'll catch up because I think on the whole, Amazon Music HD has a lot of like just really kind of unheard of titles that the other services don't have. Like they have just a lot of eclectic stuff, but their spatial audio is building. It's not quite there yet, but it's only like, what is it, $8 a month for Amazon Music HD and then a $25 Fire Stick. Whereas if you want to go the Apple route, you need an Apple 4K TV, which is more like $80 for kind of the cheap entry point, and then $11 a month.
Right. Now, I'm going to combat kind of what JDE and regular guy audio say and say that there are many streaming services that will actually pay their artists far less than what Apple delivers. I think Spotify is one of the worst. Apple actually does pretty well as far as paying their, if I remember correctly, and I could be wrong, does pretty well as far as paying their artists on a per listen basis for people that are listening to stuff. I won't get into politics. Just want to throw that out there. So anything else, Jonathan?
Yeah, there's a track, and I'm looking at my playlist trying to find out. I have 3 playlists. Of course, it's not popping up to the top, but
why don't you just have one?
I don't know. I should combine them, but I just kind of was grouping them by time so that I wouldn't, if I had people over to demo, I would know not to play this one if they hadn't been in a couple years, that type of thing, so they wouldn't hear the same stuff. It's an old 1970s. I played it over at your house. Was it? I'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. I'll try to remember the name. But it's like an old church hymn, basically played in a church.
Oh, I remember
with a live
that
audience,
one
and they had like a real heavy duty organ playing and kind of tambourine and clapping. And
that wasn't Aretha Franklin.
I think it was, but I'm trying to remember the name of the.
Was. But what track was it? I don't remember the name of it.
Accidentally got erased off my demo list or something because I sure don't see it on any of my 3 track lists. If I find it, I'll bring it up later in the podcast here.
Claude asks, did we fire Michael? He just gave up. He doesn't want to do this anymore. We're taking over. No, he has guests over, and we didn't want to make him feel like he needed to entertain everybody or entertain Jonathan and I.
He's getting some new speakers tonight.
Yep,
he's getting some JTR.
I didn't know if we were allowed to say that.
Oh, maybe it's I don't know. He didn't forbid it.
Jonathan just goes out. Oh, he's getting this stuff. Well, that's out of the bag. I actually don't know. Well, since it's out, he's getting JTR slant 10s.
Yeah.
No hiding from that anymore.
And the guy, Jeff Permanian, the guy behind JTR, is there installing them. So how cool is that? I mean, you get some top end speakers and you get the designer to come out and install them.
I mean, that's confidence behind your product.
Oh yeah.
Serious confidence, and Tony's out there too. But I think Jeff was doing a vacation or something, so they were down there. I don't even know how the whole thing was working out, but they've known each other for a really, really long time.
Oh boy. Now I'm gonna get some flack. I'm gonna be fired here. Secret blown.
Yeah, Jonathan's just ruining everything. Do you guys ever sit back and play hard media in stereo setting, kind of way it was? So is Cuddy Crew asking, do we play things in stereo? Like if it's stereo? I absolutely do. My primary amount of intake in my theater is 2-channel. I do movies and I do immersive stuff, but most of my stuff is 2-channel.
I'm kind of the opposite. For years, I've always liked the Dolby Surround Up mixer ever since that came to be. Like, what was that? First came out in, I think, my Denon X4520. So that was probably like 6 or 8 years ago. And so Dolby Surround Up mixer, I'll apply that to almost anything for stereo music. And then since Dolby Atmos came out for music, that's my go-to. I'll switch back to compare, but I always prefer the mixer or the true Dolby Atmos personally.
Excellent 2-channel, like the audio engineer. Well, depends. I mean, now a piece of media could be engineered for Atmos. I mean, it could be engineered for immersive audio. We don't really know. So the old stuff, yes, but if it was remastered, I don't know that makes it any better or any worse. Music has multi-channel recording in studio, but don't they down mix it to stereo? Sometimes. Now I don't know that they need to. I don't really know. There's so many avenues that they can take now that I don't even know how they're recording them now. It's changed so much. Everything's more complicating. But let's see if anybody has any questions, not necessarily related to this, because I think we're running out of items to talk about with recent most impactful immersive movies and music, because I didn't really watch any movies. So that was kind of, I don't know why I felt like that was a good thing to talk about. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to let us know. I don't know that I've really seen any. I've been watching chat.
I have not been watching chat. You got more attention than I do to be able to do both.
I haven't really seen any questions. If you guys asked a question and we missed it, go ahead and ask again. Jonathan, you're not going to Expona?
I'm not going this year.
Loser.
Yeah, I wanted to, and I would still like to, but family had an interference, so I said, family
Just
first.
leave them.
That's the wrong path. How many guys are you going with, by the way? Now, how many guys?
Randy, Ian, and I think Bob are all going.
That'll be fun. Are you guys staying separately, or did you get an Airbnb together?
No, we just got hotels. There was a super cheap hotel there. I think it was like 70-something bucks a night.
Oh boy!
So we're driving up. Yeah. Well, whatever. Maybe we'll just sleep at Mark's. We're driving up. I'm not driving up Thursday. I'm driving up really early Friday morning, and then we'll be there all day Saturday and Sunday, and then drive home. So I think it's good enough amount of time.
So is that first time for three of you guys? I know Randy's been there before, but have the other three of you been there before?
I have not.
It's a good show. I think you guys will like it.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll be great. I've got a lot of vendors and stuff that I need to go see, so it's a great opportunity for them all to be in the same place. Mm-hmm. Chris asks, what did we have for dinner? I had leftover pizza.
Odd question.
Well, nobody was asking questions, so he felt like he needed to deliver. Jonathan's not going to tell us.
No, I had some, what do they call it? Planko? Am I saying that right? Shrimp? That was delicious.
I have no idea. I don't eat seafood, so I don't know. Pedro Ortiz, are you going to do a review on the Sony ES Lime? What do you think about the new AVRs? I haven't really had any hands-on experience with the new Sonys. I've got, I think, a line on those Sonys coming to Mwave. So we're having conversations with Sony. So we're pretty sure, I'm hoping that those are going to be there. Be really nice if they were there, because there's a lot of positive things coming out about them right now. I just don't have any experience with them yet. Jonathan, do you have anything?
I don't have any experience with the new Sony, audibly or like hands-on or anything. So no, I don't. Not yet. Would you include that in like an auto EQ comparison if they show up, or
absolutely.
Would it just more like?
Yeah, I for sure would. I for sure would. And I'm changing it up a little bit this year so that we can control the auto EQ comparison via remote. So I can actually hand the remote to random people and they can switch between them all. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to have dedicated people doing it. So I think that'll be awesome. Just trying to give people a little bit more control over their destinies, even if it's double blind. So we're changing that.
You might want to lock the menus, especially if no one's chaperoning that, just so someone doesn't get a little bit excited and start changing stuff in the different menus to suit their own taste.
They can't change any. That remote won't be able to do any of that.
Okay.
And there'd be somebody in there. I just meant we could hand them the remote and be like, oh, you could do your own thing. And then the other thing that came out today about Mwave is we think we're going to have a room, I think, dedicated to ultra short throws.
Oh.
So we'll have like between 6 and 10 ultra short throws in one room that people will be able to experience and compare. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but I think that would be super exciting because there hasn't been a lot done on ultra short throws. There's a lot focused on like long throw projection, but there's not really a lot of discussion on the ultra short throws, especially from the enthusiast line.
Is one of the vendors lining that up, or are you going to try to?
No, we would have some help. We would have some help. It would be somebody doing a room. We just haven't confirmed it.
I was going to say, because you got proprietary screens that match each projector in some cases, so that's a lot of setup.
This would be a company that deals with that virtually entirely, so they have a lot of experience with that. I wouldn't be able to do that because I don't have any experience with it. That would just that'd be bad for everybody involved. Chris asked, do you guys have or own turntable and play albums? If so, what albums are in your collection? I own no physical media.
I own physical media, but I don't
Zero.
own turntables. I don't think I get it. And I don't fault you for liking turntable stuff. I mean, I know there's a lot of guys that do, and there's something nostalgic about it. But I went to a audio turntable comparison to a top end CD player and the same thing on LP, vinyl LP, and like a top end turntable and a top end CD player, and sit in the same chair and listen to some audiophile speakers. And to me, there was like, after I was done with that, I didn't understand why anyone would buy records. But take that for what it's worth. One guy's opinion. I'm not. I don't really understand the turntable thing. And I grew up with records, of course. My dad had lots of records, so that's what I played with as a kid. But it didn't. The bug didn't bite me on the turntable or the LP stuff.
Just star and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I already said that I have zero physical media. I'm a believer in digital all the way through. However, with some of the older stuff, I guess it would depend on how they did the recording. Like if you're taking media and making it digital, or I don't know. I don't really understand the thing with digital or with analog. I think maybe people really like the distortion.
I think there's something to the distortion and maybe the
Mhm.
little like bumps and cracks and kind of just that old fireplace type sound that kind of
Mhm.
comes through a little bit. The comparison we did was on the Adele album when that was
Mhm.
brand new years ago. This has probably been 6 or 8 years ago. And it was like a hi-fi versus lo-fi experience to my ears, but I know there was people there that liked the record player version
Mhm.
of it and preferred it. So, that's a subjective preference thing. I will tell you something interesting. One of our subwoofer meets, we found a clip of a modern rap song that everyone really liked. It had a lot of low, like 5 and 10 hertz feel for it. The subwoofer drivers are really moving hard. And we bought the like MP3 version from Amazon or something to compare, and the drivers weren't moving nearly as hard on this modern rap song.
Mhm.
Come to find out, the
It's
rap
probably the
song
dynamic range.
sample that we liked was actually recorded off an LP. So for whatever, it's that whole thing. Sometimes the Blu-ray has less low frequency than the DVD, and
Mhm.
apparently sometimes the CD has less low range frequency than the darn LP. So
Mhm.
I don't think that's standardized or anything, but it was kind of an interesting little tidbit we ran across one time at one of our comparison meets.
And I want to make sure that people understand this. When I say that maybe they like the distortion, people actually like certain types of distortion. So I'm actually saying that as a good thing. Like there are certain levels of distortion and time alignment and stuff being off that people actually find pleasing. So this isn't me like coming down on people. There's actually an element of science behind this and objectivity that people find that kind of stuff pleasing to listen to. So I'm not trying to downplay anything or anything along those lines. I just wanted to clear that up. Let's see. Can you watch for any more questions? I'm going to
Yeah,
start going through
I
stuff.
can try to start watching the comments.
So Mark Fox says he's got a cycling hum on 2 new subs. Both subs are on different electrical circuits, as is the AVP. Thoughts? Are these connected via XLR or are you using RCA?
How long are your runs? Are you getting the hum if the RCA is connected to the back of the subwoofer but disconnected from the AVR? Like you basically are trying to figure out if you're picking up electrical interference on the 50-foot RCA that you're running or 50-foot
Mm-hmm.
XLR that you're running.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of want to narrow that down.
Well, and you still could have a ground loop if all of the circuits terminate into the same ground, I think.
Well, he's saying they're on different electric circuits.
Well,
And that
circuits
and
at the
that
panel, but if
AVR is
the
a
house
third one.
terminates down to the same ground and they're not grounded at the panel and they're still using the same ground.
Yeah, there's some things you can do here, Mark. You can buy they call them like just basically a lift, and it's almost like a cheater plug, but it's I think more safe potentially. Look up a subwoofer lift outlet or something to that effect on Amazon. I have a couple of them. They were made by Monster Power, the ones I had. I bought them 10 years ago. I don't know if Monster Power is defunct at this point, but they probably have other companies that do it. And effectively, it lifts the ground plug so that you don't have a ground issue.
It's a ground
And
isolator, effectively.
yeah, and they have different versions of that. They're $30 or so a piece, and that can eliminate your problem. If the amp's on the back of the subwoofer, it's not going to be so easy to wire the grounds together. But if you had external amp on racks, like rack mount amplifiers, you could ground the chassis together. So in that sense, you take a screw out of the chassis on the amp and a screw out of the chassis on the AVR, and you just run a little electrical wire, like any kind of, doesn't have to be thick. It can be a 20 gauge wire or something that you just connect to those two screws and eliminate ground hum. But that's easy ways to solve it.
What I would suggest is try and unplug the XLR from one and see if you get the hum. Unplug the other one, see if you get the hum. You just got to isolate variables and try and get it as narrow as possible before you start treating this, because if you have too many variables in line at the same time, it can become overwhelming trying to treat the symptom. But I think Jonathan's absolutely right. If you can get it narrowed down enough to figure out where it is, put an isolator on it and it should go away.
A couple more things. You might unplug your HDMI cable from your back of your receiver and see if the hum stops. I've seen that happen before. And then it's actually ends up being like your TV or your projector that's got the ground problem. And then the last thing might be you could lower the gain on your subwoofer plate amp if that's what you're using, and then increase the gain on your AVR to offset it, because the subwoofer amp might be amplifying line noise that's like electrical interference on the RCA. If your signal is stronger,
he's got an XLR.
Yeah, I mean XLR. If you got good cables, the XLR should be not picking up electrical interference. That's the whole.
But if it's low enough, if the hum is not noticeable unless you have your ear right up against the driver, I don't even know that I would worry about it.
Yeah, just try those different things. Unplug your HDMI, turn down the gain on the subwoofer amp, turn it up in the AVR. Consider buying one of those little lift adapters, ground isolation adapters. Those are what I'd try.
Let's see. JD the expert says, I have a question. Is the RP280F and the RP250C part of the same series, both in the reference premiere of Klipsch? I have no idea, but we could probably easily figure that out.
Yeah, Michael's the Klipsch guy.
RP280F.
Short of a Google search, I don't know that answer either.
I don't know either. But I'm going to assume they are. I mean, they're both reference premiere. So I think. But I'm not a Klipsch guy. Looking at, Amazon links, it seems like they are, but I would not take what I say for gospel on Klipsch, because that's going to be Michael's wheelhouse. Bodie McBokeface asks, is there anyone here that has experience with HiFi Rose?
Nope.
What is that?
Google.
I don't know what.
We're gonna.
This better take
we
me
should know
to a good website.
Oh boy.
Oh, it's a network streamer. HiFi Rose.
They're proud of it. Yeah. $5,000.
Oh my gosh, dude! Buy Blue Sound.
They got one for $12,000 and one for $2,000. Yeah, I mean, this is they got a whole product line over in Crutchfield. They probably got about 10 units on here. No, I have no experience with them.
Dude, buy a Blue Sound. I don't think you'll be able to hear the difference. And I speak from objective experience. I maybe my ears suck, but I can't hear the difference once you pass a certain threshold. It's just not worth it.
And that threshold's a lot lower than people think, is my opinion on that too.
I mean, I'm all for going to a certain level to remove kind of the subjectivity of, am I getting what should be delivered? Like I've got a X-Saber Pro DAC that I use for my headphones. It wasn't cheap. I think it was $1,500, and for a long time it was at the top of AVR or Audio Science Review's list. But if I put that next to like my Blue Sound, I can't tell the difference. I can't hear it. So it measures better. Maybe my ears suck. I just can't hear the difference. So take that for what it may be. I think it's a lot of what happens, or you should buy streamers and DACs and stuff, much like what I say you should buy an AVR and a pre-pro for, is buy it based on the features that it has. And as long as its stats and specs are good enough, you're good to go, in my opinion.
And I'm still back at 7:15 time frame trying to catch up with these comments. Are you further than that?
I'm at 7:28. Watched a new NZ8 last weekend at a friend's house. It seemed like the whites were blue-gray for the first 20 minutes. That's probably calibration.
Blue-gray, mine are yellow for the first 30 minutes because that phosphor wheel, blue-gray would probably be a calibration issue.
Yeah.
But it could be, but it's probably that phosphor wheel doing that, because until that phosphor wheel warms up, those JVCs will have a little discoloration. Once it's warmed up, then that clears up.
Mega fast. Do you ever experience glitches with eARC getting things to properly power on or off? HDMI is a mess. It is a complete and utter cluster. So, yes.
I don't use eARC, so I don't have anything on that, but I do use HDMI CEC, and I don't have any problem with it controlling it. It's very reliable. I actually disabled it recently because I don't always want my receiver and projector to power up at the same time. The Epson has HDMI CEC, so I can, it can make them sync. But sometimes I just want to listen to music, and I don't need the projector running for hours while I'm listening to music. So turn it back off.
I think it comes down to the end devices that are being utilized, of whether things can go or not and work or not. And so when I say HDMI is a mess, that's what I mean. There's no governing body, that's holding people accountable that aren't doing things. I run into this all the time through my work with Mad VR of things not behaving correctly or working as they should. And it's a mess and it's a pain in the butt to troubleshoot. So I've run into issues with eARC through sound bars and things through my custom dealer and integrator stuff. Just something you have to deal with. I'd be interested to know what devices you're using and cables. Jason, my Onkyo NZ610 is not giving me LFE test tone from my MacBook or from Spatial Audio Toolkit disc. Works on Marantz from our showroom theater. My Onkyo is not giving me an LFE test tone. So you're saying you're not getting the LFE test tone.
Make sure that your subwoofer is turned on in the speaker menu on that receiver. I don't know that particular receiver menu, but sometimes if the subwoofer is not turned on, you're not going to get an LFE signal out. Like that's something that would have to be enabled on the menu. And I'm not saying that's a problem, but if you've tried a Spatial Audio Toolkit disc, that seems like it should be pretty accurate to turn on the LFE. Your MacBook might have the same problem. It might be configured not to even play that low. It might have some sort of filter or something.
Dumb thing, but if your crossovers, if the tone is above your crossover and your subwoofer is the only thing on, you're not going to hear anything, too.
You'd think that toolkit would be specifically catering to the 0.1 channel, but I haven't used that actual disc either. Is that the one that came from one of those other YouTube
Techno
stars?
Dad and Joe? Yeah, I have it.
Is it pretty cool? I haven't checked it out.
I want to talk to you about it after this stream.
Sure.
We'll talk about it. I need to look at. I can. Do I have the tools?
Have you played with what he's specifically asking? Have you tried the speaker selector tools?
I haven't been able to play with it at all. I have a 4-year-old. I have time to do nothing. Nothing. Zombie Russ says need to attend Mwave this year. Only 30 minutes away. Why are you not part of the Kansas City group?
For real,
dude. AVS forums, Kansas City group. You need to be there if you're not already.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing stuff. Seems like 2 or 3 times a month lately.
He's probably
not all on AVS forums.
Probably going to tell us his name, and he's already there, and we know him in person. We're going to look like morons.
You've been to my house. I fed you pizza. Someone's correcting me in chat when I said shrimp earlier. I said the wrong word. It's pinko, I guess. That's the breading or the crumbling bread that's on it.
Right, morning from the UK. The new Pink Floyd 50th anniversary Atmos is around 300 euros.
Woo.
I settled for the CD version, dude.
Just get Apple Music HD. It's $11 a month and it hasn't included. Don't pay $300.
You could listen to that almost for 3 years for that. Okay, 2.5, but yeah, you get the idea.
And you can go lossless. Now I realize it's still Dolby Digital Plus, but you can configure it to be lossless on the Apple Music HD.
Do you want to do some of those stars?
Man, I can't. You're way ahead of me. I'm still like
just go to the start section and look at Echo, and then do the one below him. I'll star them. You can be the reader.
Okay. Well, I gotta find it. There's the $300 one, so I'm caught up. So this gentleman says, JDE, I only have digital content. I used to have vinyl, but that was then, this is now. Some would still argue that vinyl is better. Yeah, we kind of talked about that a little bit. I don't agree that vinyl is better, but teach their own. Okay, here we go. How can you compare the quality of an Atmos track while not having physical media? What do you do? Actually, there's some cool websites on this, and I think Reddit contains some of these threads. I've ran across them out there where people are using spectrograph software to determine the peak dynamics and the LFE content and so forth between the disc-based content and the streaming content on the same movie. And the results are not they're not equitable necessarily. I can't say it's universally true, but certainly on some of the discs they tested, there's a lot of LFE that's cut off, like it's just missing the lowest frequencies, and the dynamic peaks are not as much. And that's an artifact of the compression they're using, right? It's not the original audio quality. They're compressing it down in order to fit a smaller container for the streaming purposes. So I think that kind of paves its way into something like Kaleidoscape that, you know, we had a representative on the podcast last week talking about that, why that's worthwhile, because it's a one-to-one copy of the disc or the audio that's on the disc. There's threads out there. Do a search for it. You'll find it. There's active threads, and you can even ask them to compare a particular movie. I have a particular example of this. A buddy was over, and we were doing some comparison between a streaming copy of Godzilla and a physical copy of Godzilla, one of the newest Godzillas, and there was a distinct difference. Like, it almost was like a muted version of it for the streaming version of it. It was notable.
It depends on the platform and it depends on the media, but there can be a distinct difference. Absolutely. Who has time for this comparison? Jed Paisley says, weird people like us.
Yeah, I mean, if it's your keenest hobby interest, you do it.
We enjoy it.
And it's fun to do with buddies, you know? That's fun.
You can find out whose ears suck. Which is usually all of us.
More than we know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially as we age.
Yeah.
So this guy says, did you see the new Onkyo RZ70? It looks amazing. Yeah. 13 channels, I believe it is. I did look that up a little bit.
I have not. This is the updated version of what Sheldon has, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Not RS70.
I think the price on it was a little higher than people were hoping, though, right?
$2,800.
The RZ50 was such a deal at like low 1,000 range. You add 2 more channels and it jumps up quite a bit.
But why would I do this over? Well, I guess this comes with
it has direct. Yep.
Instead of having to pay for it like you do on Denon and Marantz.
Yeah.
But $2,800. Well, I mean,
so that'd be the equivalent of like the 6,800 probably when that comes out later this year, or maybe even the 4,800 now potentially, because I think it's 11 amplified. I'm going off memory. I think it's 11 amplified channels and 13 processing channels. So it's probably more like the 4,800.
That's what I was just trying to find. It is 11.2. I'm trying to figure out if it's got any unamplified.
I'm pretty sure it's 13 processing channels.
But yeah, it says 11 amplified, so it's 13 preamp. So you're right.
So what is a 4,800 cost ballpark? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I don't think the 4,800's out yet, is it?
Oh, I thought it was. Let's look it up. Denon 4,800. I'm going to Crutchfield here to see what MSRP is.
I think in
like 2,500 MSRP.
I think in the 60. I was thinking the 6,800. That's what I was thinking. Brain fart. So then you'd have to buy Dirac on top.
Hold that thought, because this is only 9 channels. It's 9 channels and 4 subs, so it would probably have. Denon usually gives you an extra couple if you bring your own amp, so it's probably 11 channels if you bring your own amp. So the 70 would have a little bit more. Yeah. I don't have a problem with those Onkyos. I think I was impressed with Sheldon's. One of our local guy has the 50 series and likes it. He was hoping that they'd come out with a 15 channel version, and since they did not, he's thinking about moving over to Denon.
He's been talking about the A1H.
Pops and clicks for the win. Hey, yeah, man. That's an old Onkyo thing. I'm not sure they're still doing that anymore. But
I think he was talking about vinyl.
Oh, well, goes to Onkyo too.
Intentional or not.
My old 805, my 1007, my 3008, my 5008, my 818. I've had a bunch of different Onkyos. In the old days, the relays used to click. Every time they switched sound codec. You'd get this real satisfying thunk as the relays would switch over. And surround formats would do it if you switch between stereo or 5-channel or Dolby surround. It would click. I'd be surprised if they're still doing that these days. I haven't had an Onkyo in probably 6 years though. There's a warmth and a feeling you get from vinyl, supposedly, says JDE. I think that speaks to that distortion we kind of talked about. Distortion is sometimes considered to be a warmth.
Mm-hmm.
ASR, in his Marantz reviews, he kind of pointed out that those HDAM modules, the HDAM modules that Marantz is well known for, are kind of like distortion blocks. They're at the end of the signal chain, and they just add a little bit of distortion to the sound that's not there if you measure right before those HDAM modules.
Mm-hmm.
And people like it, right? It's adding a little bit of welcome, comfortable distortion.
And that's something Marantz actually admits to, is they have a module that puts that in, and it's they like it. People like it.
Yeah, so on the new Marantz receivers, it'll have DAC filter 2, and it'll say for bench testing, and DAC filter 1 for the Marantz sound. They don't want you to bench test the Marantz sound because they purposely add a little bit of distortion to that.
Yep. Promise you we're not blowing smoke.
Yeah, you can look that up. ASR has a nice article on that, or some talk about it in one of the threads. Roger Water, Comfortably Numb, and Apple Music Atmos is phenomenal. I will have to give that a try. I recently watched, and not that recently now, it's probably been a few months ago, but Roger Waters' The Wall. That's a phenomenal disc.
Phenomenal.
It's a Blu-ray only, unfortunately. It's not 4K, but it is in Dolby Atmos, and man, it is good. You can't buy it, and not in the US anyway. They made a limited run of them, and they're not available. But it's a fantastic concert.
Yep, that it is.
What 4K discs have you liked recently? Movies, TV shows? Oh, so what content we enjoyed while watching the family? We are on a Star Wars run for the last few months, and we're going kind of slow.
I didn't know that.
We've been watching the series. Yeah, so we're watching through. We tried what's that new one, Arndale or something like that? Am I remember the name right? We tried to look at that, but it's too slow for my kids, so we skipped out of that one.
I don't remember what it's called.
We've been watching the major movies, and then we skipped into Mandalorian, and we've been watching that one, and then we'll come out on the other side with the newest ones. My shows that have stuck in my mind for the last few years, this Free Solo, this Alpineist that we talked about earlier, the Alpineist. I really liked the Arcane series. That was excellent. What's that show on Amazon Prime that's a comic superhero for an adult audience? The same guy that made Walking Dead made the show.
With that,
it's with Omni-Man.
Yeah, I don't remember what it's called though.
I can't think of it either. That was a really standout series that I enjoyed. And it's going to sound like I like anime stuff. That's not really my genre usually, but those two shows, Arcane and let me look at Omni-Man so I can get the title of it. They stuck out as being excellent.
Mattis says just randomly, sad that you cannot play Apple Music on the NVIDIA Shield. True, but there was a sale at Costco for last generation's Apple TV 4K for like $75.
Yeah, I still think they go on sale pretty often for $80 on the last gen that's closing out, like the 32 gig ones. Invincible was the name of the show on Amazon Prime. There you go. So Arcane on Netflix and Invincible on Amazon Prime are both standout shows. Okay, this gentleman says, I'm looking at CAF R7 or Arendelle 1723 Towers, THX for my home theater. Which do you recommend? I don't have an answer for that one. I haven't heard either one of those speakers, so I can't answer with any kind of conviction.
No, I like CAF. I don't think CAF will take very loud volume very well. They have a tendency to blow drivers. So, but that's subjective, not backed by any objective data. So maybe I shouldn't have said that.
Anecdotal, perhaps, instead of subjective.
Okay,
Anecdotal.
anecdotal.
Yep. What else we got? So here's something interesting on the distortion conversation. Stafford University concluded that 20% distortion is the preferred figure for people. It's on the, what's that say? BBC podcast? 20%? That surprises me that it's that high. Think about this. We're talking about amps are measured typically at like 0.005 type levels. 0.05 if you're talking like general consumer electronics. So hundredths of a percentage or thousands of a percentage. And you're saying 20%? Speakers generally have a few percent that they'll add. Subwoofers can get up to that 20% figure pretty easily, but speakers don't usually go that high unless they're really overdriven. So 20% seems high to me, but I haven't watched that BBC podcast. I'd like to. If you won't mind, see if you can link that to us.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. Here's a super chat, Gimpy Gaming. Thanks very much, brother. Hey, Ryan, my fam connected my 7.2.4 cables to the Denon for me. A firmware update next to run Odyssey for my iPad. Any tips for the setup? What's your feeling on firmware updates for Denon and Marantz products, Jonathan? You have a lot more experience with those than not really, like
they're really solid. I haven't had issues with that. In fact, I got to the point where you can set Denon and Marantz just to auto update firmware.
Mm-hmm.
I've had Denon and Marantz for close to maybe 8 years at this point, and I haven't had any problems. And so at this point, I just let it auto update. I'll come back and it'll say it updated a firmware. So just let it run. Yeah.
Odyssey from iPad. He must be talking about the Odyssey X app, would be my assumption.
You can just run the $20 app can run from your iPad or iPhone or Android device too. You don't have to do that. You can run it from the iPad or iPhone, or you can run it from just the receiver itself. It doesn't really save any time. If you want to modify what Odyssey does, if you want to tailor stuff on the app, like set a curtain for how far it modifies or change delays or any of that kind of stuff, then you do need to run it from the app because you can't modify it after the fact if you just run it on the receiver. But yeah, I mean, just Odyssey will tell you if you got a speaker wired out of phase. The one thing it doesn't do well is if your subs are out of phase with your mains. I've never seen it be able to point that out. So you're back to buying a manual measuring system, or learning REW to make sure that you're right there. And that's easy to do because heck, some of the like rack mount amps just invert the polarity anyway. So you don't really know which way is which unless you have a measuring system.
I would recommend boosting your low end because Odyssey usually neuters your low frequency.
Yep.
Would be my recommendation. That's a subjective recommendation, but human hearing, you're typically going to need to boost your low end so that it sounds the same to us as it does for the higher frequencies.
Yep. If you have a mic stand, it's better to use a mic stand than it is to just set it on the top of the chair.
I mean, he could use the cardboard.
The Eiffel Tower cardboard setup.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. What else we got?
Chris Contreras, your thoughts on ported versus non-ported subs for a small room, 19 by 10, or is it placement? That's definitely going to be placement. Your sealed are going to dig lower and not have traditionally as much output. They'll have more output down low, but not as much in the mid to higher frequencies. But you're going to be more restricted on placement, would be my opinion on that. Anything to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could be happy going either route. I do think they have a slightly different sound after being around so many different ported and sealed subs, but it's really more at their limits when you start hearing those distinctive characteristics rather than just kind of playing them within their means.
But do you think you're hearing the port at that point?
I think an overloaded sealed sub sounds a little burdened, like it's having trouble being so clean and tight. And I think an overloaded ported sub, it's not the same type of overload characteristic. It sounds like it's a little looser or not as tight, but a different way. Like the extreme limits on both they just sound different. It's almost hard to describe, but you can, after you've been around them enough, you kind of can tell the difference. If they're EQ'd the same and if they're both very capable subs, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck telling the difference.
JD, HDMI cables have different formats. What is the latest one now? Version 2.1, and the cables have to be certified, are created equal. I mean, they have to be certified. I don't think this is a question. I think this was talking about how much of a disaster the HDMI space is. They're supposed to be certified, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're certified, if you know what I mean. And there's also some issues where cables are passing certain requirements and bandwidths and attenuation, but they're not behaving as they should with certain devices. And maybe it's the devices, maybe it's the cables. I don't know. But there's the HDMI space is just a complete and utter cluster in more ways than one. And it becomes a troubleshooting nightmare to try and fix things in the video signal chains a lot of times, especially when one cable works and another cable doesn't. And then that same cable that doesn't work works in a different signal chain.
JD, are you asking a question that I'm not sure I'm
No,
reading?
he's
Or are you
not.
just
It
kind of
was just a
complaining about
statement.
the
It was just
standards?
a statement.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a mess. I agree.
Let's do this one first. Frank V. Question about RCA runs. Is the 30 to 35 foot RCA run too long of a run for a subwoofer plate amp? My amps don't have XLR. It's a long way.
It's not too long if you're not getting electrical noise. That's what the bottom line is.
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
If you do, you could do wireless.
If he can afford the latency, yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of AVRs and stuff now have, Denon has like 500 milliseconds that they can add, which is a lot.
The trick that you can kind of run into, and I think some of them have gotten it down into the small amount of milliseconds, which is great. But initially, the problem with the wireless things was that if you were a gamer, your latency would be put off so far with the wireless sub that you couldn't. Your audio couldn't sync with the games. If you weren't a gamer, it wouldn't matter, right? Because you're not doing real-time interactions, and
that's
it
a
can
good
just
point.
delay it as long as it wants. I think that last I looked at this, and it was probably in the last year, SVS in particular makes a quality wireless thing that advertises very low latency, and if I remember right, it's less than 20 milliseconds, which is low enough to not really to be noticeable for most people, right?
Batter asks, Denon X3800 versus Marantz Cinema 50 versus Anthem 7740. Which one is better for Klipsch? I don't think it really matters about the speakers.
No, those are like an 8-ohm speaker, right? So it shouldn't really make any difference.
I'm going to say the Denon purely because of price. I don't think you'll hear a difference between any of them.
You might hear a difference with the Marantz, but it will be that optional DAC that we talked about earlier.
Okay. Yes.
Like they purposely color the sound, and it's very minor. Like it's so subtle that if you weren't flipping it back and forth, I'm not sure you could tell if you left the room which one was. I know I personally am 100% sure I couldn't tell if I left the room. I would know which one was playing, but you can hear a little tiny subtle difference if you flip back and forth, where the Marantz adds a little bit more warmth or graininess to the sound, if you will. And the Denon 3800 and the Marantz on DAC 2, which is the benchmarking thing, will be identical. It will be identical. Now, the Anthem 740, I don't have a whole lot of experience with Anthem. I would tend to go with Denon and Marantz just because they're such a big player in the industry. They're just pretty much bug-free, and bugs are stomped out immediately. I mean, I've reported a bug to Denon in the past, and they fixed it the very, very next firmware. So they're responsive. Stuff gets fixed. There's very little problems. They have just a huge base. It's like they do it well.
Yeah, I'm going to say the 3800. I don't think you would notice the difference between the Marantz and the Denon unless you were doing a direct A/B comparison, and it was fast enough for your auditory memory to not wreak havoc with the comparison itself. It's really difficult to do. I mean, we've done the amp comparisons, and we've done DAC comparisons and speaker comparisons, and human auditory memory is just terrible.
Well, when we did an AVR comparison, probably now 8 or 10 years ago with the Kansas City group, and nobody could tell a difference from the AVRs when all the EQ stuff was turned off, and it was just like a direct sound output. We had Pioneer and Yamaha and Onkyo and Denon, and nobody could tell the difference. Now, once you do auto EQ, we've talked about that before. It's anyone's guess, right? Because you got your bundled mic tolerances, you got your audio EQs, targeted settings that they're trying to all do a little.
You're going to hear a difference there for sure.
Yeah,
when we saw that at the room correction demo, and you've done it in the past too, and you definitely can hear a difference, and it's easy to hear.
And sometimes they're not right. Like you you'd think that you do an auto EQ and you make them all reference, and the reference is nowhere near close.
Mhm.
I mean, we had a 20 dB swing on that 2014 comparison between auto EQ things. We had about 8 of them in there, and that's a huge, huge, nasty difference.
So Finster, and I'm not going to take any more questions, guys, because we got to get Jonathan out of here. Finster asked, back to the RCA.
Oh.
How about a 100-foot RCA run? That is
Good
a
luck.
long way. That is
Good luck.
wireless. Do wireless?
Yeah.
Or XLR.
Yeah. Yeah. XLR might even start to get a hum at that distance, potentially.
If it's a good cable, I wouldn't think so. Maybe.
Yeah, it depends on what you're running against.
Another question. What would it be a nice pair of power cables with banana plugs for a not so pricey range?
Power cables with banana plugs. You mean
has to be
cable?
Talking about speaker cables.
Sure.
Just make your own.
Yeah. Copper's copper, man. If you get oxygen-free copper, which just basically means tightly wrapped, and it's 100% copper, there's no difference if it's truly 100% copper. Now, you want to be careful not buy CCA. That's copper-coated aluminum. And sometimes they advertise and sometimes they don't. But if you cut the end of your speaker wire and it looks silver inside with like a kind of a gold outside, that's copper-coated aluminum. And for that to work at the same transmission rate, it needs to be 3 gauges larger than copper. So if you were going to run 14 gauge copper, you'd need to run 11 gauge CCA. That's how that breaks down as far as the electrical transmission rate. So just avoid CCA.
Yep.
There's a really good website for this called the Roger Russell Wire Table. So if you look that up, Roger Russell Wire Table, he's got a great website that tells you exactly the gauge wire you need for the distance you need with the impedance speakers you have. So if you have a 4 ohm speaker or 8 ohm speaker, it'll tell you what gauge you need of wire to run. Yeah, it looks like Ryan's going to pull it up. And then also that site is awesome because it's got a lot of the kind of a myth dispelling discussion on speaker wire and talking about how some of the demonstrations of the past with like monster cable and stuff would be misleading and how they were doing it. And then like real world tests with, electrical properties analyzed and stuff to kind of just figure out what's really going on. So Roger Russell Wire Table. Are you going to share that one?
I already did.
Oh, I thought you were going to pull it up on your machine.
No, I just shared the link for people.
Let's pull it up real quick because it's such a good little site. People can get an idea what it is. I'll pull it up on my side.
Very well.
I love that site. It's a one-stop shop for anything speaker wire related. So present. Let's do share a screen. Share a screen.
Thank the Lord Jonathan is sharing and not me because it would be a disaster.
You're still scarred from last week, huh? Okay, so I just searched for Roger Russell Wire Table. Here we go. And you can click this wire table here. And let me see if this can get larger for you guys. So here's what it amounts to. And this is the way they've measured this is they don't want more than 5% of the rated impedance of the system. So the resistance speaker wire not exceeding 5% of the rated impedance, and that's deemed to be inaudible. Like people can't hear that if it's less than that. So for 14 gauge with your typical 8 ohm speaker, you can run wire up to 80 feet. You don't need the big old huge wire because most people aren't running 80 feet. So you hear people say, well, I got 10 gauge just to be sure. Well, 10 gauge is good for 200 feet. So, it breaks it down. That little skinny stuff that comes with a lot of speakers, that you bought your home theater in box, and it comes with this wire that's basically like
single-stranded.
Horrible stuff. Well, that stuff's only good for 12 foot. So, you don't want to run that around your room or you'll actually hear it will become audible. Now, at the beginning of the site, all kinds of really cool things like testing that they've done, and this misleading wire demonstrations thing is very interesting. Talks about a challenge where somebody's basically set up this blind test where they have coat hangers being used along with like high-end speaker wire, and nobody can tell the difference.
Bruce says he runs 1 gauge welding wire.
there you go. Yeah. Anyway, that's a great site to check up. Roger Russell, and then just wire tables, the specifics. So let's go back here and stop sharing. There we go.
Mike Luna asks, is it okay to mix ported 18 and 24 infinite baffle subs?
You might want to be careful with that because your 24-inch infinite baffle subs are going to have great response down below your ported 18-inch subwoofer response. So you're going to probably have a phase issue unless you accommodate for that. You'll need to make sure you use the right HPF and that you're not basically changing the polarity of frequency. Say your 18 hertz is tuned to 16 hertz or whatever it is. 16 hertz down to 5 hertz, the infinite baffle will potentially be out of phase with the ported and cause you some sound issues.
You can fix it. It just may be a huge pain in the ass.
Yep.
Which was my world incorporating my 18-inch seal with my 18-inch ported. I did it. It just took 5 days.
You know, we didn't mention, the last guy was asking about banana plugs too, and we just dodged that one.
Oh, yeah. I found some really cool ones in my distributor that are, you just undo this like clippy thing and then you slide it on the end and you clip it down and it locks in. It was awesome. Super cool. I think you just got to find ones that you like that are well made and not made of crappy materials. And
you probably do want to try to seek gold plated to a degree so they don't corrode, because they will corrode over
good
time.
Materials.
Yeah. And then also the little expansion joints on them, they kind of like flower out. On the cheapy ones, those kind of compress and then they just loose fitting and you know, they get worse over time. The metal's not resilient enough.
But in all honesty, how many times are people unplugging and plugging things in? A lot of times.
Me? A lot.
You're not most people.
Most people probably never.
No.
They do it once.
They plug it in and they never see the back of their speaker again. Nothing wrong with that. It's just Jonathan and I are weird. Batter ass. Oh, we already answered that question.
Oh, this guy says lamp cord. Yes, actually, that's true because that's just 100% copper wire typically. So you go to Home Depot and it's way cheaper than speaker cable, and it's basically the same stuff. What else do we have in here?
We got 3 questions left. Eric says, question for Ryan, is your 2-channel setup part of your surround, the Martin Logans? Yes. My 2 channels are my Renaissance 15As up front. People always swear it's not just them on, but that's why I like them. I'm really weird and I have full electrostatic bed layer, so gotta go the 30-degree dispersion for the narcissistic theater.
So, oh, go ahead. What's that one?
Go ahead. What?
I was just on the copper conversation. Someone's saying oxygen-free copper, and I don't know if you're being a little sarcastic about that. That's fine if you are. There's a reason for it, right? Because copper oxidizes. So if you've ever noticed your old copper speaker wires that have been sitting out in the air, they turn like kind of a rusty brown. It's no longer a clean copper. It's just oxidized. It's just the air reacts to it. And that's going to happen. Frankly, it's going to happen regardless of whether you have oxygen-free cables or not, because the end of it is not oxygen-free. It's exposed to the oxygen. But let's say I cut the cable 6 inches back and I pull the sheathing off. If you have oxygen-free copper cable and it's legitimate, that copper inside that 6 inches back will be just pure clean copper again. It won't be oxidized. So you have a nice new connection. And if you don't have, I mean, this is kind of a marketing term to some degree, and some people probably say I'm oxygen-free copper, and it's not legitimately like sealed that way, or it's not, you know, the external material isn't actually sealing the copper. But if it is sealing the copper, it basically lets your copper have a longer lease on life, because that oxidation does affect the electrical transmission. So, you know, it's nice to have that, because if you cut it back 2 inches, you got a new cable again, basically.
But remember, would you be able to hear this?
I think it goes back to that Roger Russell Wild table, right? So if your electrical transmission is less and you're trying to keep it under that 5%,
yes,
at some point it will cross that threshold. Does it have to have like green barnacles growing off of it as far as oxidation? I don't know where that threshold is. But I certainly, anyone in here that's been in this hobby has gone to an old pair of speakers that they've used for 10 years and noticed like, hey, this speaker wire looks, you know, like that's really dark. It doesn't look like copper anymore. So that's the heritage of that. It's not purely snake oil, but you'd probably still want to change the ends on it every once in a while to take advantage of it.
I don't even know how to say this name. Usagore?
It's got an X in it. They get you, huh?
The X's get me. I'm new here. I have a question. What kind of music genres are you guys usually listening to?
Man, if you saw my playlist, I'm all over the place.
I am everywhere. Electronic, dance music, rock, alternative, country. Even though I don't really listen to country, there are some really cool country songs out there. Classical. I mean, everything. Pop, R&B, rap.
Yeah.
If it's good, it's good.
Is there a music you don't like? Maybe that's an easier question since
I don't like the majority of country. Most of my listening is going to be alternative, electronic, blues.
Infected mushroom type music.
Yeah, Infected Mushroom is one of my favorite
I really
artists.
like that group. I like all those brands that you talked about, all those genres. I can't get into jazz, especially like the kind of jazz where it's made up as they go along.
No,
like improv.
I can't do that.
Music. It's too random for me. I don't really connect with that. But otherwise, I like most musics. And I played in a jazz band, so I have a little bit of that heritage. But I just never. It was kind of like what you did in high school when you were in band, and if you want to do extracurricular, and I was. But I did never really connect with it.
Do you like screamo music? Some of it. It depends on what it is. It depends. Ryan's a candy flipper. What does that even mean? I must be.
I don't know what that means either.
I don't know what that means.
I'm not even sure what screamo type music is. Is that just like hard metal, heavy metal type stuff where they're just screaming in the mic? Is that what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Nah, not for me. That's another one.
Some of it's good.
Sheldon really loves that.
Like Pantera?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not for me.
You don't like Pantera?
I don't like any of that real heavy metal stuff. I don't get it.
It's not impromptu jazz, Jonathan.
Those are two genres. I should have said heavy metal is another one.
Fair. I'm still confused about what's a candy flipper. Is this like, now I've got to look this up. The hell is this? I'm like a boomer. What is that?
Oh boy. Country music makes my ears depressed, says Gimpy Gaming.
Candy Flipper says one who rolls on ecstasy and then drops acid right after. No. I don't drink. I don't know. I've never done any of that. Not that it's bad. It's just never done it. I don't have a problem with any type of music. If a song can make the hair on my arm stand up, it goes on my sound demo playlist. Doesn't matter what genre it is. If they can do it, good for it. Is that actually a room back there or just a background? No, this is just a background. I have more speakers in my house than I know what to do with being a dealer. I think those are F20s. I have some F20s here, but it's just a background because nobody wants to look into the bathroom that's back behind the green screen. I mean, we can if you want, but I didn't think anybody would want to. It's a little boring. I think that's the end, Jonathan.
Yeah, the questions. We missed one from Rex, he says. But I think
where? Where?
Rex, repeat your questions. We don't have to dig back up. There's so many comments in here. We're not trying to skip anybody here.
Childish comment. No.
So this guy says skip it and just use 12.2. He's talking about Molex. I'm sorry. He's talking about just like house wiring. Absolutely, you could. That's pure copper. You absolutely could. It'd be pretty stiff, as you know, but it would work.
I think my theater's done with 12 gauge.
Somebody was asking a question about whether a braided or solid core is better. I think the technicals are discussed on that Roger Russell site, and it's been a long time since I've read it. I think there are actually advantages to braided, but it's kind of more a technical question than I know.
Yeah, but the ability to be able to hear a difference or even see it measurably, I mean,
it's going to be so
you're so small.
Inaudible, measurably inaudible to our hearing.
No, Rex, where's this question? He dropped. Oh, there it is. Built 2 behind the screen subs this week. I have 2 Crown. Do I need a mini DSP? Yes.
You don't need a mini DSP. He doesn't need that. Well, it depends on what else he's got going, right? If he's got just 2 subs and he's got an AVR, almost all subs have.
Well, I just made the
sub
assumption that he needed to EQ. I guess is where I was going with that. He needs to EQ those, regardless of what it is. You're going to have more granular
delays.
You're going to have more granular control over a mini DSP.
But I don't. If those are your only 2 subs, Rex, if you just have 2 subs, you probably don't need a mini DSP. Just let your AVR handle it. Even if you don't use auto EQ, once you run it, it will set the delays, the time delays, the speaker distances, as they'll call it, and your levels, and get it all matched and everything.
Yeah.
Look at somebody's calling me Gene Simmons. I don't look like or sound like Gene Simmons, do I? What's that about? I don't even understand that one.
Gene Simmons.
The Kiss singer?
You sound like Gene Simmons. I don't know. Maybe. Is XLR to bare wire be good to hook up to my non-XLR hookup? That should be fine.
What? XLR to bare wire?
Yeah.
Should be fine if you just use 2 of the 3 plugs, I guess. I don't know why I wouldn't, but it also depends on the gauge of the wire, because XLR is a signal wire. It's typically not thick gauge. You might be talking like, depends on the XLR, but you might be talking like 20 or 22 gauge, which would be for very short runs.
Yeah, but for a few feet or something, that should be fine. But I guess if it's a sub, that could be a little bit of a distance.
Yeah, I mean, you'll know what size wire it is when you pull the end off, because you're looking at bare wire. If that's real thin wire, then look at we're back to that Roger Russell wire table. Look at that.
Just do a XLR to RCA cable. I wouldn't use an adapter, but just do an XLR to RCA cable. That'll fix it. It won't be balanced, but that should fix it or allow you to use it.
This is a good question. Polarity, delays, out of phase. A lot of things can happen with that. You probably don't have 4 sub outputs on your AVR, and so they just may not be set up properly. Your
subs are going like this instead of like this. They're running into each other.
I'm trying to think if he could do this. He could probably do this a couple ways. Unless you have a receiver that has 4 subs out, you're going to need like a mini DSP, and you're going to need to learn like REW.
It depends on where his subs are. What if they're you've got 2 and 2
co-located? He could stack them. He could stack them or put them right next to each other if he doesn't want to stack them. That would work.
Yeah, that should help. You're still going to need to deal with delays. Your delays might be slightly different in the millisecond range.
They should be close enough if they're right next to each other. That should probably fix this problem. But absolutely, I mean, we were over at a guy's house here fairly recently, had 3 subs, and one of them was out of phase with the other ones, and it was kind of fighting. So yeah, you're back at like 1.5 instead of 3, so you went backwards.
Time alignment and phase alignment is very, very important when you're doing multiple subs, because if the waves are running into each other, it's going to cause more damage than it's going to benefit you.
I had my first experience. I'm going to put this one up there. I had my first experience with ear listening fatigue this week from a long listening session. What is the main cause of listening fatigue? High frequencies, dBs, or something else? If your speakers are being overloaded at your loud listening levels, that distortion can actually cause your ears to be fatigued. There is a certain point that I don't care how clean your speakers are, your eardrums are physically working hard and going to be fatigued. But I will tell you this. If you take an audiophile like Bookshelf or an audiophile tower, or even just like a set of towers from Best Buy or something, and you try to play them at reference level, and then you take a pro audio speaker that's capable of 15 to 20, 30 dBs more than that same thing, and you play it at the exact same level, say you play them both at reference, you're going to have less ear fatigue from the cleaner speaker. So there's 2 elements to this, right? The distortion can make you have fatigue, and just maxing out, overplaying the speaker.
Yeah, but you'd have to go to massive volumes to be able. I mean, think about concerts. I mean, you don't necessarily have ear fatigue until like the next day or a couple days later, as long as the speakers are set up properly. So the volume level is pretty substantial, I would say, past even reference to be able to get ear fatigue. I think it's more likely distortion, in my opinion.
There's a lot of variables there. It'd be hard to define in general terms, but yes, generally speaking, I think we covered that one.
Eric drops another super chat. Man, you guys are being generous for Youthman today. You guys deserve more likes. Always a pleasure to listen. Thanks very much. It's mainly Jonathan. I'm just the comedic relief.
That's you just earned it right there. What does this mean? What's he talking about? Simon?
I don't know that anybody's going to want to be with you if you're 6.5 feet long.
And moving on.
What is the Met recommended mic for a mini DSP? Omni mic.
I have a little bit of a growing concern with OmniMic. The inventor of it, Bill Waslow, is not paying attention to the AVS forum thread, and I hope he's still around. But I have a question in there. You're frozen again. Nope, I guess you were just sighing. On my Windows 11 and my Windows 10 workstations, both, my OmniMic, whenever I plug it in and it hits a peak, it now drops to 89%, the mic sensitivity. And I don't think it used to do that. So check with yours and see if it's doing it. So I wrote on the AVS forum thread, it's been really dead lately. I wrote a comment in there and said, is anyone else doing this? No comment back. I called out Bill Waslow, who's the inventor of the thing or the designer of the thing, and he hasn't responded yet either. So the product still works great, but if it doesn't stop at 89%, every time you hit a peak, I think it's the OS doing it. You want your peaks you want your 100% to stay there, right? Because that's how it's determining the sound level. If your Windows machine, I'm not sure why I'm all blurry right now. I'm looking at the, if your Windows machine is dropping the mic sensitivity every time it hits a peak, then you don't even know where your SPL is anymore. And the SPL meter is built in the OmniMic. So that sort of sucks. Any rate, I think either they'll have to update their software or we'll have to figure out what's going on with the Windows driver to eliminate that.
What you should do is try and fire up a virtual machine and load OmniMic into that with a no updated version of Windows 10 and see if it's the same problem.
That's a good idea. I haven't tried that yet.
That'd be my recommendation. And with how, I mean, they're stupid fast to set up now. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah.
Try that. See if it's probably a Windows update that caused that with how much stuff
Sheldon and I were talking about that because we'd both run into it on that venture where we were trying to figure out if codecs were different volumes. If like Dolby Atmos with 15 speakers lowered the volume of all the speakers a little bit to be in line with Dolby Atmos with 7 speakers, if you will. Because you can't have, if you say every speaker hits 105 dB and there's 7 speakers or there's 5 speakers versus 15 speakers, the sum of 15 speakers at 105 dB is going to be much more in the same size room than just 7 speakers. So we had this little theory that in our initial testing that it was lowering, the more speakers you had in the processor arrangement, it was lowering the volume on all the surrounds and so forth. But then we kind of realized, hey, OmniMic's monkeying with the darn sensitivity every time we're hitting a peak, and it's getting really hard to measure. So we kind of failed on that until we figure out what's going on with the OmniMic.
Okay, one more question. I'm skipping the Klipsch one because I honestly don't know, because I don't know anything about Klipsch. Okay, 2 more questions. John Gonzalez, I'm using bookshelf speakers for Atmos. They're suspended from the ceiling. Should I tow them in towards the listening area or keep them straight?
Tow
them in. Aim them at the main listening position.
Yep, you got it. At least partially. If you don't want to name them, if
you're a narcissist like me, it's aim them at the main listening position. But if not,
your dispersion characteristics will dictate this to some degree. Look at if they're 45-degree dispersion characteristic or 90 degrees or 150 degrees. It may tailor it. You know, if it's like this, maybe you want to lower it like that. If it's like this, then it probably doesn't matter so much how the dispersion characteristics play into it. Think about playing pool and do it that way.
You want to. It's going to depend on your seating arrangement and the speaker's dispersion. But I'm a narcissist when it comes to that. 1 chair. Gordon says, I have 1 sub with a plate amp and a second sub that slaves the sub. Off that one, will my AV only see 1 sub? Yes. As far as I know.
What's he saying? I have 1 sub with a plate amp.
Slaving off of another sub.
The second sub that's a slave sub. Yeah, your AV doesn't know there's 2 subs. In fact, that might cause some drama with the timing that it's trying to do, the phase alignment.
If they're not co-located,
Yeah, if you don't locate them, you'd at least want them equidistant from the main listening position, and that can kind of help with that.
I mean, some subs have enough with like phase control and stuff on the back. I've seen some even with delays and things, at least adding them.
Man, it's hard to set that stuff by ear, though. You're going to need a mic set to get that dialed in perfectly.
Maybe he has one.
Yep, there you go. Look at this guy. He knows the fix, and he's holding out on me about the sensitivity on the Omni mic.
He's even look at he's even got the avatar. What
SC
is
audio.
this?
If you figure that out, I'm all ears, man. Because
Let us know.
Yet.
He's gonna hold it for ransom.
There you go. Yes, Microsoft is a beast. It thinks it should take over everything. You're right. And there's a thing in there that says, like, I don't remember the exact name of the setting, but there's some sort of thing under advanced setting that's like, do not let the OS take control or let the application take control. And it doesn't matter which way I have that checked. It just seems like it still lowers the sensitivity every time it hits a peak. So yeah, I'm all ears. Hey, look at this. There's another guy. These guys are coming out of the woodwork to fix this for us. Got to buy a program to lock the volume? Son of a gun.
I'm betting it's a Windows thing. Just try the virtual machine. It'll probably fix it. And then just use that virtual machine for your calibrations. Be what I would do.
So what other than an Omni mic?
U-mic.
Well, yeah, REW and U-mic.
But we found with the U-mic that they were boosting the low ends, but I haven't tried one of those other calibrated U-mics that people were recommending that wasn't directly from Mini DSP. I don't know if it was doing the same thing.
And we've talked about this before. I'm such a big fan of the Omni mic.
And it did well.
It's so easy. Yeah, I mean, it compared it to your calibrated mic that was much more expensive. It was measuring in line versus the U-mic. You play a CD or a flash drive or anything, right? They give you about 16 tracks. Some of them have high frequency only, some have low frequency, some are left speaker, right speaker. As fast as you can plug that into your system and play it on CD or USB, you're measuring because the microphone's already calibrated. It has a cal file. You plug that in the software. It's SPL corrected. You got real-time analysis. You can move the mic around and watch the graph change in real time. You can average different positions. It's got decay. It's got gating. It's got everything. Everything you need in a simple package. And
the
so
problem one problem I have with it though is it does smoothing.
It does seem to be a little smoother, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when you're trying to compare. It's easier to look at.
Yes, but if you're trying to get the raw data, it's not as
raw,
granular and raw as like RAW or something is, but it does well enough.
What did we figure out? Basically, kind of 1/6 on Omni mic looks like 1/12 on RAW or something.
No, I think it's the other way around.
Yeah, Omni mic's a little smoother in the representation if you're trying to do 1-to-1. I had that backwards, I think.
Yep. Rex says, just wanted to say I appreciate you guys taking time out of your Sunday evenings to do these videos. Very helpful and always enjoy the banter. We could just be blowing smoke and everybody could be buying things from, doing their audio journeys based on 2 schmucks or 3 schmucks when Youthman's here.
Rex, that's very generous. Thanks, man.
No, we appreciate it. Thank you. I think it's all about making it so other people don't have to reinvent the wheel. I don't think there's anything else. We need to get out of here.
I need his personal phone number so I get that information.
When he finds it, he's making it sound like now that he doesn't know.
I think he's trying to remember. All right.
Nice.
We probably better get it off here because
Benjamin says he sent you the mic solution.
Yeah, I know, Ben. Hey, Ben. Thanks, man.
He was holding out on you.
You need to contact this Ben fella for your Mwave. He did one of the music sections for one of the East Coast shootouts with a spectrograph of all the audio, and it was fantastic. So it was a visual. He just snipped a bunch of songs together, made them one track, and then there was a spectrograph showing the different, like a real-time analysis of the music, an RTA, showing the hot spots, what frequencies they were, all that kind of stuff. It was for a subwoofer shootout. It was a lot of fun. Maybe he'd be willing to help you with that.
Well, Ben,
what do you say?
Are you, Ben? Will ya? Huh? Now, if you're interested, feel free to shoot me a message. If not, no harm. Jonathan just wanted to put you on the hot seat.
Ben and I have been friends for a lot of years. We met at one of the audio meets.
He's here trying to help you, and then you're like, hey, this guy can help you. Have him help you with your event.
Oh, look at this. Now he's saying, I'll do a tutorial. Teach a man to fish. That's what he said. Teach
But
a
I
man
don't want to
fish.
learn to fish.
I'd like to learn that. Yeah, Ben, let's do a tutorial.
Teach
I'm in.
Jonathan. Then I
Oh,
can
look
put
at
Jonathan
this.
to work as slave labor. JD the expert says, I asked the question. I don't think you guys seen it.
Uh-oh.
Ask the question again, and then I'm done. After Zephin asked the question, do you power conditioners actually give cleaner power?
Yes. Is it audible? No.
That depends
Probably
on the
not.
power conditioner. Some of them can be negative, but something from like Panamax or Furman, they can help.
I think we talked about this on other podcasts.
Yeah, we
Effectively,
did.
you want to make sure that you have legitimate sine wave, like recreation. Either it's running off a battery or it's creating a true 60 hertz sine wave, and not like a simulated or stepped sine wave. If you're going to really do this right, they're more expensive. So, like Panamax has one model that does it. It's the PM5400. That's the one I have. Or if you run a UPS, you want to get one of their true sine wave UPSs, and that's going to make a legitimate 60 hertz sine wave signal. It's going to be a little cleaner. Is it any of this audible? Probably not. Probably not. Is it measurably better? Yes. It's cleaner. Because they're generating that 60 hertz sine wave for the electricity right there in the unit. It's going to be cleaner than coming from the wall and being interfered with the refrigerator and the freezer and the vacuum cleaner and the hairdryer and all that aquarium pumps and whatever else you got going on in your house.
That was
It's
an
gonna be a
interesting list of
perfect
stuff,
clean
Jonathan.
thing. Oh yeah, well that's my house. That's what we have running here. 4 girls and a mom.
What was the other question? Oh, JD the expert. Did he ask the question? No. I gotta go find it. And this is the last question.
We said that. You said that about 10
I'm
times.
done. Well, then we keep talking, and then people ask questions. Oh, this is the Klipsch one. Another question: what would be a good subwoofer cable for my 2 Klipsch R115 SWs? It doesn't matter.
Did you start it? What would be there? It is.
This one.
Anything
a good
that doesn't
RCA
hum?
or XLR cable that's not built like crap.
Anything that doesn't hum.
Yeah. I mean,
if you want a recommendation for I like monoprice premium cable RCA. They're inexpensive. They're very thick. They're rubberized. They're good quality cables. For cheap.
If you want like solid, really good cables that are heavily trusted by the live music industry, Blue Jeans or Megami, but they're going to be more expensive. Will you be able to hear a difference? No, but maybe you want some eye candy.
Yeah. Yeah. Typically what you get with a better quality RCA is the ability to potentially go longer distances because they're a little bit better insulated. So you might avoid electrical interference. But if you had like a 3-foot cable, there's been tests done, and that Roger Russell Wild cable test has done and has some illustrations of those tests. They've got the cheapest, jankiest cable they could even find on like Walmart. That's like super thin. It's got the big red goofy thing with the silver connector that's made of cheap Chinese tin. And then they take some sort of extremely $1,000 3-foot cable from some audiophile company, and they measure it, and there's no electrical difference, for such a short run.
I love the cables with batteries that on the ends, but the batteries aren't even connected to anything. They're just like in the cable.
Yeah. Interesting enough, on ASR, he's taken some time to measure cables, and sometimes these audiophile cables that cost so much measure worse because they got like little electrical circuits and stuff on there that actually make it measure worse. So people are paying thousands of dollars for a worse signal.
But it's not the measurement, Jonathan. It's how
maybe maybe it's adding that little bit of distortion.
Distortion.
Well, people aren't stopping. Here's some more questions in here. Are you going to cut it off?
Damn it. I don't like.
Look at this. People. I'm getting some. I really had to clean the carpet. That's a true story. No euphemisms. My wife said, you need to get off the podcast a little bit early because I want to shampoo the carpet tonight. And it went 3 hours. Yeah. And then I got a text message that said, all right.
It 3 hours.
Thanks for volunteering to clean the carpet tonight, Jonathan. So that was how that went. So then I had to do the shampooing of the carpet.
Man. The endurance on this guy. What if you run a dedicated line 20 amp? Does that matter? Well, for most like big theaters, like Jonathan, you have more than 120 amp, don't you?
I have 2, and I wish I'd done 3, but I also have sort of stupid amount of amplifiers, and you do too. I mean, we're like, you normally don't need this. You normally
I
don't.
have 4. But our subs and stuff, they can't handle it. 15,
Yeah.
I'll trip them, and I do. Not now, but I will.
I've never thrown my breaker except for a single time, so I'm pretty much covered with my 2 dedicated 20s. But I think I can trip it on demand if I wanted to. I volume limit my stuff at reference because I have a little bit
and
of
he doesn't run
tinnitus,
20 dB hot.
and I run my subs about 9 to 12 dB hot, and I've only ever tripped it once, so I have enough. But if I just want to keep cranking that volume, I can
Absolutely.
trip my 220s.
Are we done now?
Oh, Bruce says not even when you broke the tiles. That was dedicated 20s and a totally different setup. Those weren't my subs. Those were those JTR pair of JTR dual orbit shifters, 2 JTR orbit shifters, and they were on 20s. And actually, he did trip a breaker that night.
I mean, that's a lot of power. You're talking 8,000 watts.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, with my 5 4000s, I'm going to have 20,000 watts potential just in subwoofers.
Are you going to be able to easily run new lines? I guess you're right there by your panel, so that's nice.
I can. That's not a problem. And they're not running hot enough to be any type of an issue. My rack's on its own. The rear subs would effectively be on the room, but I don't think it's going to be an issue at all.
So JDE says 3,000 watts will trip a 15 amp breaker. There's caveats there, man. It's not quite that easy. Mm-hmm. So a 15 amp breaker will pass much more than 3,000 watts momentarily.
Mm-hmm.
The breakers we use are heat based, and if that's a continuous pull, oh yeah, like what is it? It's more like 1,800 watts will trip it continuous.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's momentary burps like bass, you can do more than 3,000 watts.
You can do quite a bit more than 3,000 watts.
Yeah.
You can pull quite a few more amps if it's momentary. It's I think people get stuck up on that, and you can pull quite a bit because virtually nothing we're listening to is sustained. You wouldn't be able to handle sustained 105 dB. That'd be awful.
Yeah. I mean, the value there is just 120 volt times 20 amp. So if you do 120 times 20, it's 2,400 watts continuous would trip a 20 amp breaker. But it's continuous. And there's charts out there that detail how long, how many seconds it takes to trip, more or less, right? Because each breaker is going to be a little bit different. And if it's tripped a bunch of time, they get weaker, and all those kind of little things play into it. But you can, I mean, heck, for instance, I have 4 iNuke 6000s, and they are not truly 6,000 watts each, but they are more truly like, I limit mine to 1,600 watts per channel. So that's 3,200 watts. All 4 of those things, I run off a single 20 amp breaker, and I do reference plus 9 to 12 dB hot as my subs. So we're talking hit the limit lights on all 4 amps, which means they're pulling 3,200 watts a piece times 4. That's getting close to, that's over 12,000 watts. And I'm on a single 20 amp breaker. And like I said, I've only thrown it one time. So 1,600 watts a channel, 3,200 watts an amp times 4 on one single 20 amp breaker. If I'm playing, how I could throw it if I chose to was put it at reference and just start playing dubstep with the long bass beats that are kind of like, you know, the dubstep type music. It'll trip that breaker. But if I'm watching a movie and there's a bass hit in there or something, nah, you can have a lot of bass hits. It can be a really bassy scene. It's not going to trip the breaker.
I think that's it.
And this is true too. Just because an amp says 3,000 watts, it's not literally pulling 3,000 watts all the time.
No.
Absolutely true, Bionic Bob. It's really amazing how little power the amps are pulling most of the time.
Correct.
They burp into those high numbers.
They
very
burp
briefly.
into those high numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to have to be an Mwave shirt. I burped into it.
We got a lot of Mwave shirts.
Yeah,
I think
we do. None of them are going to come to fruition. I hope somebody just comes with a bunch of shirts and just hands them to me. I'd wear them. All right. We held you 45 minutes over. I tried to get you out of here.
Hey, I had fun. It's okay. Thanks, man.
You got to go clean the carpet?
Not tonight. I'm
Okay.
just gonna go be with the family, play a board game or something.
That's where I'm going.
All right, guys. Thanks for the evening.
Thanks,
Enjoyed
guys.
talking to you
We'll
guys.
I don't know if I'll be here next week because Expona's going on. But Jonathan, you should be here, and I think Michael will be here.
What,
I don't know
next
if I'll
week?
be here.
Yeah, I don't know what's
No,
happening.
next week's not Expona. Next week's Easter. Will you be on?
Ooh, no, I bet you Michael will cancel next week, but I'm not gonna speak for him. That's my guess. I
Okay.
probably won't be. We'll probably be visiting family.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all I got. If you guys need anything, you know how to reach me. I don't even know how he pulls those banners and stuff up. I have no idea.
I got it.
Do you know how to do it?
There you go. Is that it?
Look at it go! Don't need Michael. Somebody
got
was
all
saying,
these
did Michael
Kaleidoscape
get,
things from
did
last week that
Michael
didn't
get
get cleared up.
fired? No, Michael didn't get fired. He's got company. We didn't want to pull him away. Okay.
All right.
Anything else, Jonathan?
No, we got to get off here. We keep saying
We got to get
farewell
out of
and
here.
never leave.
All right. All right, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you guys later. Until next time.
Toodaloo.